Welcome to Transformative Principal, where you learn how to be a leader and not just a manager of a to-do list. I am your host, Jethro Jones. You can find me on Twitter at Jethro Jones. Your to-do list is a hungry monster that is never satisfied. For the last year and a half, I've helped principals get awards, get promoted, and find the time to do the work that really matters. I recently opened a new mastermind slot. Schedule a call with me and let's overcome the stressed and isolated principal position together. Go to the show notes for this episode at transformativeprincipal.org and click Schedule a Call with Jethro. Welcome to Transformative Principal. I am so excited to have not just one, but two guests on the program today, Danny Bauer and Kelly Crane. First of all, Danny, welcome to the podcast again. I love talking with you. And when we actually turn on the record button, it's like a double bonus. So welcome.
Double bonus. Yeah, I'm excited to be here, Jethro. And sorry if you heard my trash emptying on my computer. It sounds like my computer's about to blow up. So I figured I'd empty my trash and, that would make things run smoother. Anyways, I'm here with my co-conspirator in fighting crime and leveling up school leaders, Dr. Kelly Crane. And the brief bio is that she's done it all and better than any of us. She's had all the roles, including superintendent, and brings a really valuable perspective to our team and how we help leaders level up.
Excellent. Well, welcome, Dr. Kelly Crane. I'm excited to have you as part of this as well.
Thanks, Jethro. Thanks, Danny, for the intro. I don't know that I've done it better than anybody else, but in leadership, we all try to, don't we?
That's right.
We sure do. And we'll give you that you did it better. If Danny says you did, I totally believe it. So for those of you who live under a rock and don't know, Danny is one of my best friends and the host of the Better Leaders, Better Schools podcast and a mastermind, and has been an inspiration to me for many years, and so grateful to continue to talk with him on a regular basis. And so when we get together and record something for you guys, I'm on his show in a couple months and he's on my show today. So this is a lot of fun and we love doing this. So the first thing that I want to talk about is you said that Kelly is your co-conspirator. What does that mean for the people that you're serving who don't know what it is that you do?
Right. So, we had the podcast and Kelly's joined the team. So in the podcast, she started doing the tip of the week. And that's just a really brief part where we try to add some value as a quick hitter. So you have the normal intro where I tell a story and try to whet the appetite of the ruckus maker listening. Then we do the tip of the week, just something very practical they could put into place right away, then get into the main content. So podcast-wise, she's been a big help there. She's starting to, create content that we can share out through the different social channels and the blog. But most important, and what I'm most excited about, is the value she brings to the mastermind. So, over at Better Leaders, we have 4 cohorts. We're going to be opening a 5th cohort, and that one will co-lead, and eventually I will disappear from that group and it will be her baby. So I'm just so excited to, again, bring her vast experience and perspective across all these different chairs that she's occupied within school and serve school leaders that way.
Well, great. So Kelly, what is it that principals need to know about the role of superintendent? Because we have our ideas, but what is it that we actually need to understand as current principals?
I think as a current principal that until you are in those shoes, you really don't know what someone does. So the anomaly of, the elementary is always going to say stuff about the middle school. The middle school is always going to say stuff about the high school. High school principals they do everything. They want to know what's going on over at central office. And then when you get into those shoes, it's just a wide variety of fires that are there. Probably the number one thing is the legal aspect of what happens in education. You spend a lot of time dealing with the law, dealing with employment law, dealing with those types of behaviors from your classified and certified staff that needs to be addressed. A lot about politics, a lot about not only governmental politics, but the politics within perhaps your school board, your board of directors, and dealing with all of that movement. Finances are a huge issue that you have to stay on top of and make sure that you are leading with transparency on that finance side. And then bond issues are a big issue, and closing buildings, growing fast and building buildings. Those are all important things. So it's very different than what you see in the principalship.
So what's an appropriate way for a principal who wants to gain experience in those areas to seek advice and mentorship from their superintendent or other superintendents about preparing for that role?
I think that any type of coursework you can get into will kind of whet your appetite a little bit into that superintendency, any of your certifications that you need to go down. But network is probably the biggest thing that you can do, is just network with people. If you're an aspiring superintendent, you need to kind of get with the same minded people. One of the things that Danny and I are going to be offering is a superintendent mastermind, and there will be some other masterminds coming up that those aspiring to be a superintendent can just get better at their skills and at applying different things and learning from each other. Masterminds are kind of one of those things that people don't know about. I didn't know about it until my husband told me, was reached out to Danny on some podcast stuff. And that's kind of how I learned about it. And I was like, gosh, if I would have had this back then, because you are so isolated and you just need people to talk to. And you do have your local superintendents that you can talk with, but having a dedicated time where you can go to a sacred place and talk with people about all the different issues you're facing is just incredible.
Yeah, it really does make a huge difference. And people can join Danny's mastermind at betterleadersbetterschools.com/mm. And my mastermind is at transformativeprincipal.org/mastermind. And you are totally right that it's one thing to have those there local around you that you're dealing with all the same issues, but it's so valuable to have someone who's not connected to the problems that you're facing to look at it from an outside angle. I was talking with some people in my mastermind last week, and they felt like there was this huge issue that was just overwhelming everything, that was all they could see. And then when we talked about it as a group, they realized that the things that were so big to them because they were so close to it were not actually as big barriers as they originally thought. And so they were able to break that down a little bit and see that, okay, here's where I just need to cut through and deal with this. And what looked like a big, huge problem at the beginning turned out to be, oh, I've already laid the groundwork for dealing with all of this. I just need to take the next step, which ends up being this very small thing. I had a question from someone on Facebook a couple of weeks ago where they were an aspiring principal, and this is to both Danny and Kelly. They want to become a principal, and they're in a charter system, and the charter school is going to open up a new network, a new school in the network later, and they want to be a leader in that school. What's your advice to someone who wants to step into a role in a year or 2 or 3 of what they can do today to get into that role?
At least something that I think about is start doing the things that you think that they do. So Kelly already talked about the networking piece. And maybe she'll talk about, how we help people prepare, interview-wise to get that next role. But, you start acting as if, right? And so do as much research as you can. Back to the mastermind piece, like that's the power of the network. But really that community was birthed out of that quote, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to be some type of leader, well, get around them, see if you can shadow, join some type of learning network. I hope it's ours. I hope it's Jethro's. If it's not one of us, do something. I think the power is like just understanding that all of us are better than any of us, and stop trying to do things alone. So act as if, get as much knowledge, experience as you can. Identify, what are the questions you should be asking? Where are the gaps in your knowledge? What are those things you need to fill out? Who is in your network that you could connect with, right? That might act as a mentor or something that you can join professionally. Those are some of those ideas. But if I could backtrack a second, I want to share this story about fish, and it's not my story. It's from David Foster Wallace. But the point is this: whether it's moving into this new role, whether it's as a superintendent within the mastermind or a principal in the masterminds that Jethro, you, and what Kelly and I do already for school leaders. When you're so close to a situation, it's really hard to see, right? And I think that's kind of the point that you were making. And so here's a story about the fish. We all have blind spots, right? So David Foster Wallace says this: there's these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And those two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other fish and says, "What the heck is the water?" Right? And that's what we do as the mastermind. We're all in the water, but you just don't realize it. And so it helps eliminate blind spots and helps you be just very wise, in your approach to the big challenges that you face.
Jethro, I would add that going into the principalship, instructional leadership is very important and probably one of the things that most school districts are looking for in a leader. They want them to have that instructional leadership knowledge. And so to prepare for that principalship, I would suggest that you become very knowledgeable about the different curricular areas that are offered and what's going on in that school district or in a school district you are pursuing, and be able to go into classrooms and really evaluate teachers accordingly. I think that's so important. Evaluations are another big thing, and just being very consistent, making sure when you're shopping for a school district that they have an evaluation tool, that they're not kind of hanging you out to dry. There are a lot of schools, I'm shocked, that just don't have good evaluation tools and systems. And then once you have that, you've got to have timelines, due dates, and you have to abide by those. If you're going to tell a teacher that you're going to be in their classroom at a certain time and they've scheduled a time, you need to show up at all, unless it's an extreme emergency. Just don't get on your computer and change that date because you're not feeling like it that day or something else. So really those are the two big things that I think are important, along with what Danny said.
Well, Kelly, I think that response is really, really insightful, that as you become a leader and work with people, you have to follow through on the things that you say you're going to do. And that is, I don't want to say that's old fashioned, but that's the word that's coming to mind. It's like an appropriate way of honoring somebody else is by having that commitment to follow through with what you say you're going to do. And that's something that is, often lost in our society now, but it's still something that's so valuable that matters way more than we typically think that it does. And so we've got to, stick in there and continue to do that. Go ahead, Danny.
You got to follow through on your word. You're in the Go community. Kelly's in there. And we have a course that I dropped recently on authentic leadership. And a quote that I shared and a story I shared comes from Lance Secretan. And he says that authenticity is the alignment of head, mouth, heart, and feet. It's thinking, saying, feeling, and doing the same thing consistently. This builds trust, and followers love leaders they can trust. So to Kelly's point, you say that I'm going to deliver X and ship X, or I'm going to be there on this day. You've got to do it because it's about trust.
Yeah. And if you don't have that trust, then nobody's going to follow you anywhere. And that is all too plain to see when you go into a building and you can feel that there's not that trust there. And that's a pretty sad place to be. So I want to talk a little bit more about authenticity, because that is what you said, that quote that you read, but it's also being real about the things that you are dealing with. Kelly, earlier you said that as superintendent, you just don't know what is going on until you get that position. And as principals, we can all understand that piece as well, because teachers don't have any idea what we're dealing with until they have our position also. And so how do you share the challenges of being a leader in a way that is not complaining or disrespectful to the people that you're talking with, but to help people, not to tell them how difficult the job is or anything like that, but to help them see that there's a bigger picture. And the thing I'm trying to get to is there's more to the job than what we see from the outside. Kelly, you first. How do you help people see those challenging things without, violating confidentiality, divulging things you shouldn't, but helping them recognize that there's more than just your classroom, there's more than just your school, and helping them see the bigger picture?
Two things come to mind, Jethro. One is empathy when you're visiting with people, and the other is vulnerability. And I think as a leader, when you're visiting with your staff, you can always refer back to stories and mention those times when you are in a situation and use it as an example to help them bridge kind of that gap and to know how to deal with maybe something in their world. But I think you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable to let them know. I served on several committees, and you can bring that back in for community building for relationships, because everybody needs to be doing that. I think when you speak with people, just being real and having empathy helps, but I do think that you can do it through storytelling and giving them a little bit of an idea of kind of what your day looks like. And I think that's important. I also think it's important that you give them a list. Oftentimes principals want to know, who do I contact if I have this, this going on, and so on and so forth. Really list out exactly who does what, and maybe the handbook or somewhere where they can I always said, just post it right there so you can just refer to it and say, if you have a question about an employee situation and it's the assistant suit that deals with HR at that point, go there first before you go straight to the superintendent. So I think it's just lining things out and letting them know, here's everything that the superintendent deals with, here's what the others deal with, so they kind of have an idea of the job load that you have.
Yeah, good. Danny?
I think to the empathy piece, if you can look somebody in the eyes, reflect back because of your active listening, and really summarize what that person was trying to say and demonstrate that you really understand what they want to know and maybe why they want to know it, then almost the answer you give doesn't matter, right? Because if a person really, really, really feels truly heard, and you follow that up with, Jethro, I wish I could tell you, but this is one of those cases where, this one you're just going to have to trust me on, or something like to that effect. I think you'll be able to get by with that, because radical listening, is just not that common.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about radical listening and what you mean by that.
Working with leaders in the mastermind or coaching one-on-one. Now we're doing office hours where people just sign up and we're giving, free coaching just to add value. And, everything's about relationships. So to me, radical listening is just really being there in the moment with somebody. And I've done a number of like mindfulness courses and apps, like Headspace, Waking Up course, on and on. I'm currently doing 10% Happier. I got a Labor Day deal on that. And I do it because I always learn at least one nugget, right? And today, the big idea was that, mindfulness and being very aware, internally aware of what's going on, helps you then with your external awareness in terms of social awareness and relationship management. So in short, mindfulness is just basically focusing on your breath, realizing that your head is a mess, and all of a sudden there's like so much traffic and voices going on. And then you go, oh my God, I was thinking, or I was feeling, or whatever. And you bring yourself back to the breath. That happens in conversations. It might be happening with you and Kelly right now. And you just realized, oh my God, what's Danny saying, right? But the point is that you bring yourself back. And this has really helped me in my marriage, in coaching or whatever, and just in friendships, because I can see when my mind's wandering and I don't want it to. It just naturally happens. So I bring myself back. I'm here for this relationship. I want to offer value. I want to listen. And that's a bit of what I mean. In addition, it's just being able to rephrase back, what somebody says, and not going for like a yes, but going for like, that's right. You got it exactly. And not giving it up until you do, because I want people to experience two things working with me. I want them to feel seen, and I want them to feel heard.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think about the times where I've been, and for me, this has been most powerful with students, where a student is talking to me and they have noticed that I am not totally there. And like a teacher, they stop and wait until I am there. And that is so annoying when teachers do it, and so hurtful when a kid does it, because they know that you have checked out and that you're not listening and that you're thinking about something else. And that's only happened a couple times, but when it has, I have had to like refocus, come back and apologize to the kid and say, you're right, I wasn't listening, continue, and I am listening now. And as a school leader, there's so many different things on your plate that it's easy to get into that situation where people don't feel seen and they don't feel heard. And it's so vital to get back to that and ensure that that does happen. So, Kelly, do you have anything to add on that?
I totally agree. It took me to a situation where I think we all do it. And I think that the important thing is to acknowledge that you do it. Mm-hmm. And even acknowledge before a conversation starts. I remember vividly my administrative assistant would come in and sit down, and your computer's there, your phone's there, you got everything sitting there, everything's going. So all the notifications are going, you have to turn all that off. But I would actually sit there and say, Brenda, if it looks like I'm not paying attention, stop and just say, Kelly, focus. I'm giving you permission to do that if it looks like my mind is wandering and I'm not paying attention, because my mind is going everywhere. And once I did that, she was able to, cut me before I recognized it. She recognized it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's a bad thing to do if you have the tendency to wander and be distracted at times.
Yeah. And this brings up a good piece about something that I haven't talked about recently on the podcast that I think is just so important. I have these communication cards that I have on my wall on my door in the office. And so whenever people have a problem or an issue, these are basically like sentence starters that are, I made a mistake, I need help solving a problem, I have a storyline, and there's a bunch more than that. But these are very clearly set up to remind me as the leader how I need to respond. And you can get those at jethrojones.com and just search for communication cards and you can find those. But those are something that has been so powerful for me in giving people, like, recognizing my weaknesses and giving them the tools they need to help me remember how to overcome my own weaknesses. And, it's not like everything has to revolve around me, but like, I know that if I'm not totally engaged, then I'm going to miss something, or more often than not, I'm going to respond inappropriately to how they need me to respond to be successful. And that's damaging to them. And I don't want that to happen. So having something, Kelly, you said you reminded someone, if I get off task, you got to get me back on, and being able to be clear and open about that. I think that really gets back to the question that I asked about how do you help people? How do you be authentic with people when you've got all these other things going on? Help them see what you're experiencing. I think that those pieces all come together to make a really nice package of how to help them. So as we close down here, I want to just talk a little bit about the mastermind. We both offer them, and they are amazing and life-changing and just really inspiring for people who are feeling lonely in their leadership. And even if you're not feeling lonely, it's great to surround yourself with awesome people who are doing things better. So, Kelly, what do you want to add to the conversation about the mastermind? Everything we've talked about is stuff that we go through in there. So what do you want to add to the conversation?
For people who are not really aware of what a mastermind is, I kind of use the analogy, think of Hollywood Squares or think of the Brady Bunch, and you're looking at a computer and that's what you see is a bunch of people and you're all able to talk to each other. What I love about the mastermind is that you can pick up so many different tips, pointers. It is a sacred space. That's the strongest thing in the mastermind to me, is that you can bring some of the things that you need to bring to the mastermind that you can't take to those you work with, because you probably supervise all of them and you should not be talking to them in that matter. So those are the things that I think are just so fulfilling, and they give you so much direction and almost an inner peace that you've reached out. you've kind of gotten some points and you can mesh it all together to what you're going to do and how you're going to handle something. So I appreciate that both of you have offered that platform and have offered an opportunity for leaders to have a place to go to talk to one another and really share their biggest struggles.
Yeah, Danny.
We've talked about, a few challenges we've helped leaders navigate around. One in the mastermind recently, there's Bobby, good old Bobby I'm thinking about. And here's the thing, in the mastermind, you share a challenge, or he didn't even know it was a challenge. He just wanted he wanted to get some off his chest because he felt righteous. He felt righteous in the moment. So Bobby's telling this story that he had only 10 minutes to prepare a presentation, right? And that is not enough time. It's not his fault. The principal was called in to the central office. And then he says, Bobby, you got to present for me. Okay, cool. Where is the slide deck? What's the main ideas I need to get across? And so he reviews as much as he can and crams in for 10 minutes and then delivers a presentation. And he feels good about it because Bobby's an accomplished speaker. He normally does fairly well. And so what happened, a teacher knocked on his door and said, Bobby, what was that all about? It was a mess. It didn't make any sense. Your stories didn't connect. Like, we're just more confused than before you presented. He's like, that's funny. I thought I crushed it. So he goes to a teacher he trusts, right? And he says, Jethro, how did I do? And you say, Bobby, you sucked. Your stories didn't make any sense, didn't connect well. And it just didn't make, it wasn't anything that benefited us. You would have been better off not sharing your presentation at all. And Bobby turns to Jethro. Yeah. And he says, well, you know what? I think I did pretty good. So I wouldn't change a thing. Right. And he wanted to tell this story because he felt beaten up. And as leaders, you will get beaten up. You're in the spotlight. People are going to critique what you do. That's okay. But what Bobby didn't realize in the power of the mastermind is, how do you think that landed with that teacher that you trust, right? That you have this great relationship with, that you said, Jethro, give me feedback. And when Jethro courageously does, you say, I'll leave it. I did it perfectly the first time, right? And that's the type of stuff that we help people with. And of course, much bigger challenges as well. But here's the thing. You got to learn from the mistakes of others, right? We all can't live long enough to make all the mistakes ourselves. And so you're just going to absolutely accelerate your leadership development by getting in a community that's all on the same path and want that radical self-reflection and absolutely are on the adventure of leveling up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really powerful. So again, if you are interested in the mastermind, you can go to betterleadersbetterschools.com/mm or transformativeprincipal.org/mastermind. And then we would love to have you apply and join our masterminds if it's a good fit. And, that's a piece that I want to add about that, is that it's really important that you trust and want to work with the people that are in that group. And if that is not there, it's not going to be a good experience. And, that just matters a lot. So you've got to make sure that you know who you're joining and what it's going to be like, and that you've got all your questions answered before you do that. Because when it's awesome, it really is awesome. So I paid for a coach a few months ago, and I just did not feel like that person cared about me as an individual, that they were just trying to have a person to coach for their own personal gratification. And that just doesn't work. And, I never felt good after our coaching calls, and it just wasn't worth it. And then I got another coach just last month, and this person went above and beyond and served me personally and did things for me and helped out. And it was really, really powerful. So I just want to reiterate, you've got to know who you're dealing with and trust that person for that coaching relationship to work. And same thing in the mastermind. You've got to feel accepted and feel seen and feel heard, like Danny was mentioning. And that's really important. So the last question that I ask Danny and Kelly is, what is one thing a principal can do this week to be a transformative leader like you? Danny, we'll let you go first and give Kelly a second to think about that.
join something, some type of PLN if it's not our masterminds. Because back to the story about fish in the water, you're in the water, you don't realize it. So you need a community, to help you see what you don't see and to uncover your blind spots. While Kelly's thinking, Jethro, this is going out around Halloween, right?
Ooh, spooky.
So here's another gift for your listeners. This one, no, Kelly, I'm going to talk to you. Hey, Kelly, why didn't the skeleton cross the road?
I don't know, Ralph. What?
Because he had no guts.
Oh, that's awful.
Good one, Ralph. Good one.
He had no guts.
Get it?
Oh. So to be transformative, you do not want to tell jokes like Danny Bauer. I'm just going to say. No, that was really pretty good, Danny. So I would say that one of the things that you really need to make sure as you move forward is to be vulnerable when it is necessary to be vulnerable. You do want to surround yourself with like-minded people, but we don't know it all, and we have to reach out to others. And I think that it is so important to be vulnerable and let people know you're human. And I think it takes a village to raise a kiddo, and I think you could lead that way as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Anything that you want to add before we sign off, Danny?
Jethro, why don't skeletons ever go trick-or-treating?
Because they don't have the guts.
Because they don't have any body to go out with.
Oh, no.
Oh, man. Well, thank you for ending on a high note. As always, Danny, awesome to talk with you. Kelly, so excited to meet you and so excited that you're working with Danny as well. This is fantastic. And you can get show notes and links to things we talked about at transformativeprincipal.org/episode 302. Thanks so much for listening to Transformative Principal and have a wonderful week.